here we have it. This is a summary of certain things, certain alternative points of view to the modernist phase of the high modernism up to the 1970s. This is the 70s modernism split up. It splits up into different sets. It's under attack. People are searching for alternative ways of doing the same job, of reflecting human experience, right? Of concretizing human experience, in fact, into design products. But where did it get these alternatives? Well, what it did was to look into the past and what modernism had actually done. It had, in its attempt to create the new universal society, one size fits all, what it had done is to repress certain categories of experience, right, as being irrelevant or marginal, if you want to put it that way. And for instance, we take an example. The first one is regional. Do the experiences and cultures of, Mexico, India, do they equate with those of London, Moscow, Berlin, or wherever? Right? The answer is no, because a lot of the cities began to look the same. They began to look the same under that imperative, that modernist imperative. Right? So you could marginalise regional experience, cultural experience, in favour of this modernist, classical, absolute set of categories. So what we're looking at is an attempt to recover, after the repression, it's an attempt to recover the repressed aspects of the cultural identity. Entirely possible to say that, strangely enough, maybe naively, I don't know. If you're Mexican, you could produce a Mexican architecture. If you were Indian, you could produce an Indian architecture. And so on and so on. Or a Middle East architecture, an Arab architecture. That's one. The second repression, which we know quite well from the 19th century, after the 19th century, was an attempt to clear the decks. Modernism attempted to push all the architectural experience of 400 years since the Renaissance, clear it all away in order to reveal this classical piece of architectural clarity. And there was the pristine, cubic, white, right-angled ducts. Right? In other words, everything had gone. All the familiar elements of generations of people had been pushed to the side. All, in the Western case, all the classical elements, post-classical, all the complexities of Baroque or whatever, all the familiar issues about churches and Gothic spires and all the other paraphernalia of 400 years, had just simply been marginalised, right? And that applies equally to other cultures' work, right? The architectural heritage of, as I said, the Indians or the Mexicans or whoever else, right, was pushed aside in favour of the single universal value of modernism. Right? Now, here's pop. Pop is simply the idea, it's not about songs, it's simply the idea of familiar, popular cultural elements in a society that exist there, and those also have to be brushed away, airbrushed out, if you have Photoshop. Okay? Familiar and popular images are out. We are talking about in modernism a very abstract level of the game here. Very abstract level. Very intellectual level of the game. Very scientific. And by its very nature, it is not popular. Do you understand quantum mechanics? I don't. And nobody else does apart from me. Physicists themselves. Here we have another one, which was in a sense repressed, but in fact comes up as quite a strong tendency in architectural design and whatever. High tech. All this means is this, that there's a realization that, look, the modern imperative has not been completed. We should really have completed this by going full steam ahead using technology to solve, design problems of the period. And this is what high tech is. It is modernism on steroids. Okay? In other words, all problems, all, mind you, can be solved by the applications of technology. Okay? Humanists, try your eyes out. Okay? And here is this one here. I like this. Eclecticism, of course, means that in an attempt to solve a problem, you choose from different sources. You just mix things together from different sources. All right? But in fact, funnily enough, I see, or I have come to see, that eclecticism is actually the fundamental basis of architecture. That is what architects actually do. They, take a bit of this from somebody's experience, a bit of that from somebody's experience. They do not sit and spontaneously generate pure form. It doesn't happen like that. What they do is they see with their eyes and from their own experience of interacting with other architects, and they select bits from this, bits from that might solve their own particular problems. So eclecticism is a mix, okay, but it's something that was not regarded well from a modernist point of view, because it meant a lack of purity and a lack of clarity in the final image. Deconstructivism is part of this group of tendencies. It is an alternative point of view to modernism, right? And that is what we move on from. So what Decon does, admittedly in a more abstract, sense, Decon asks, what is the truth? What is the complex truth behind this design problem or this image? That's what it's asking. And here we have an interesting case. All those approaches that we've seen, eclecticism, high tech or whatever, end up as styles. They end up as a stylistic choice. People make choices. Decon is basically saying that the building, in order to reflect truth about the experience it represents, the building should be equally complex. That's really what it's saying. Now, you might buy into that, or you might not buy into that. Okay? That's neither here nor there. But it's the idea that the complexity of the building, the end product, should in fact represent the complexity of the experience which it seeks to represent. Okay? Now, that may be naive, may be idealistic, but it is the general approach of deconstructivism. So, here we have a statement, I am multitudes, from the American poet Walt Whitman. Okay? And basically it's saying the I is a singular, is a multitude. Okay? Multitude of individual characteristics and dreams and ideas and so on. Right? Now what we have to do is to look at where the idea of deconstructivism comes from, because it doesn't lie in history. It comes from somewhere else. This, another Geiger image, is the multitude that underlies the experience. Deconstructivism has its origins in the theory of repression introduced by Sigmund Freud in the 19th century into psychology. He invented psychology, supposedly. Okay? Now that repression, as we have seen, modernism represses ethnicity, cultural identity, familiar and popular images, and so on and so on, and eclecticism, right? It represses all these things in order to achieve that pristine, pure image, that public image. But we can see from Freud's explanation of repression, there are dangers in that repression. Now that we've got up to looking at the origins, the philosophical origins of deconstructivism, based on Freud, what we want to do is to look at his ideas on repression and trace that downline to deconstructivism in its application to design methods. We'll do that in the next part of this continuing lecture. Thank you.